Started. Welcome to the case studies section, where we're going to see some talks about the insights and lessons learned from actual MOOCs. My name is Kenny Hirschman. I'm with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and we're going to get started with the first session, Adapting MOOC Technology for the Liberal Arts Classroom, with Wadhera and Allison Zengilowski from Colgate University.
Hello, everyone. My name is Allison.
I'm Sid.
And we'll be presenting on some research we've been doing. Our professor, Karen Harpp, is slacking off, sitting in the second row here. But we'll be able to tell you a little bit about what we've done with online ed at a liberal arts institution.
So, how many of you have heard the word disruptor used today? Oh, come on, that should be everyone in this audience, because I'm pretty sure George used it this morning. So, Silicon Valley has a penchant for calling things disruptors. One such disruption that we are all here to talk about today, obviously, is the MOOC. Now, one interesting thing about MOOCs is there's a lot of literature, a lot of which some of you have written, about MOOCs. It talks about, the pedagogy of MOOCs, the data and analysis of MOOCs, and the way that MOOCs really operate and work. But the one thing you really don't notice is literature on the intersection between MOOCs and the liberal arts. And that's for a pretty logical reason, because there's fundamental philosophical and practical differences between MOOCs and the liberal arts. For example, the liberal arts like to focus on the idea of a small, intimate classroom that focuses on that face-to-face connection and learning, whereas MOOCs, as we all know, really like the idea and the focus of distance learning and learning on a massive scale.
So with these differences in mind, we can outline a few reasons for why the MOOC model has not yet nicely integrated with the liberal arts. To begin, MOOCs currently have poor modes of interaction among participants, and at liberal arts institutions, that student-to-student interaction is highly valued. So currently, these MOOCs and their ability to integrate peer interaction and learning is underdeveloped.
So along with that, there's also the issue of really low engagement and active participation rate in MOOCs. So when you compare it to a liberal arts classroom where you have a lot of interaction between peers and the professor, and you compare that to a MOOC where it's hard to not only interact with the other people who are taking the MOOC, but it's even harder for you to get access to the professor or the instructors, you can see how this is sort of a failing and an issue. The other big issue that we sort of have here is this behaviorist approach to learning in MOOCs, or the very instructor-centric learning. And when you compare that to a lot of what in-person classrooms do, where you learn through multi-modes and you learn by connecting with other individuals, it really differs significantly and is somewhat of a failing that we find in MOOCs.
So Colgate University is a small selective liberal arts institution with about 2,900 students and 300 faculty members. One of its defining pedagogical features is the core curriculum. And since 1998, Professor Karen Harpp has been teaching a course called The Advent of the Atomic Bomb, which fulfills the scientific perspective on the world requirement as part of the core curriculum. And so with this course, we aim to marry online education and the liberal arts. What was unique about this course is that in the spring of 2014, we offered it to students on campus and to alumni through the edX Edge platform. And we believed that the inclusion of alumni was pretty necessary given the historical nature of the course content. We wanted to infuse a broader set of perspectives than could be provided by a classroom of 18 to 20-year-olds.
So in the fall of 2014, we ended up at Colgate University hosting an online learning symposium that featured three very important speakers, Fiona Hollins, George Siemens, and Mark Biscay. And in those conversations with students like ourselves, we discussed the intersection that I previously mentioned between online education and the liberal arts. So out of those conversations, 5 undergraduate students, including, again, the two of us, joined Professor Harpp, who is still slacking off with her phone in front of her. So we joined together with Professor Harpp to really revamp the 2015 iteration of the Atomic Bomb course.
So using our prior experiences with MOOCs and edX technology, we decided to incorporate what we believed were the best practices for online design mechanisms. We really focused on enhancing interaction among participants and also increasing learner engagement with the course content. Specifically, we decided to do this through shortening our video lectures, introducing comprehension questions, creating small discussion groups, and also the implementation of a video project that we called Fireside Chats.
So the other big change that we made between 2014 and 2015 is that we actually flipped the classroom. So in 2014, only the alumni participants were allowed to or required to watch the videos on edX. Compare that to the 2015 course, where students were also required to watch the videos on edX. And the good thing about that is that it gave more time for in-depth investigations and discussions. One such in-depth investigation, as you can see in this picture, was an investigation into explosions and the science behind them.
So as has been mentioned at this conference previously, having short video lectures is something that is a positive addition to online courses. And so that's reinforced by a study by Kim et al. That looked at online video lecture dropout rates in edX MOOCs, specifically saying that videos longer than 6 minutes in length result in a significant decrease in learner engagement. Given that, we decided to take our originally 1 hour plus long video lectures and cut those down into multiple shorter units ranging from about 3 to 17 minutes in length. Mostly because we wanted to ensure that our participants were not only watching the videos, but also enjoying themselves while doing so. And we also decided to incorporate comprehension questions. And so these were added after the video lectures to encourage students to engage with the material in a participatory manner.
So the next big thing that we did was with the discussion forum itself. Now in 2014, everyone who well, first of all, in 2014, students were required to post, and alumni posting was optional for them. So what we did in 2015 was, instead of having them all post on the same discussion board, we changed that and we divided it up into small groups, or cohorts, as the edX function is known. So in that process, what we really tried to do was simulate the small, intimate classroom that we get at Colgate University. And by doing so, tried to enhance the conversations and enhance the connections between alumni and students in this discussion board.
And lastly, we incorporated this idea of a video project. So there were about 2 to 5 Colgate students, and they would decide on a topic of their choosing. That could be from course content that was not discussed fully in class or potentially brought up in one of their cohorts. And this allowed students to delve further into information and really have a stake in what they were discussing. Additionally, we hoped that this would, since these videos were posted online, we hoped that this would allow for alumni to become a little bit more engaged in the course, because they were going to be able to take part in conversations that may have occurred in class that they weren't available for, or in other cohorts. And so lastly, what we hoped these fireside chats would do was to increase the connectivity between the students and the alumni who were interacting on these discussion boards. So we wanted to create that familiarity and that visual connection between the two groups to really make sure that the alumni wanted to post and wanted to interact and create relationships with these students.
So the first and most important sort of thing to realize when it comes to the video lectures is just look at how many people were watching. So, and we look specifically at the alumni who are watching in comparison to 2015 and 2014, obviously, since students weren't required to watch in 2014. So as it turns out, in 2015, 95% of the alumni watched the shorter lectures, whereas in 2014, 78% watched the longer lectures. We attribute this, obviously, to having shortened the lectures from 1 hour to anywhere between 3 to 17 minutes, and thereby making it a lot more accessible and easy for them to actually watch the videos rather than immediately get disengaged.
Additionally, the majority of the students and alumni chose to utilize the optional addition of the comprehension questions, and most of them found them useful in understanding their knowledge of the course content. And what we found especially intriguing was that of the students who did use the comprehension questions, they scored approximately 8 points higher on their midterm and final exams than their peers who chose not to. Although we obviously cannot prove causation, there is a positive correlation between answering the comprehension questions and higher exam scores.
So the next thing to talk about that's very important is obviously the discussion board and its analysis. But to give you some context first, the discussion board, so in our 2014 course, we had approximately 380 alumni participants. When you compare that to our 2015 course, we actually decreased that number to 250 participants. Yet despite that, across almost every single metric, we actually had higher participation by alumni in 2015 than we had in 2014. And so in part we attribute that to, obviously, the cohorts. So there are a couple of important things to notice by this. First is the fact that in 2014, we had approximately 23% of all alumni post at least once. In 2015, that number jumped up to about 47%. Now let's move on to the fact that per week, you actually had only 2% of alumni, total population, posting in 2014. That number jumped up to 5% per week in 2015. And finally, of course, is this graph, this logarithmic regression, where in 2015, our discussion board and the number of posts decreased substantially from week to week and sort of followed this logarithmic regression, which is something very similar, in fact, to MOOCs. So the fact of the matter is that the addition of cohorts, while it most certainly made the discussion board more active and really engaged alumni, it also made our discussion board participation look a little bit more like a MOOC.
So although these cohorts were mostly a success, they did pose some challenges to the 2015 course. And this is due to the presence of lurkers, because there were some groups, some cohorts that weren't quite sustaining discussions. And so the alumni in our case, because they were not required to post, were typically the ones that were lurking in our course. And so what we found is that there may be a minimum number of participants required to sustain active dialogue within a discussion. So what we did in order to revive some of these dead cohorts is we actually decreased the number of cohorts from 10 to 5, thereby increasing the number of active participants in each group. So we found that in order to sustain continuous dialogue, we needed at least 7 active participants in each group. And so hopefully then this will allow for these cohorts. They allow, yes, for, if they are large enough, for interesting conversations to happen, but also they should remain small enough to encourage a sense of community and to build relationships among the participants in the group.
So regarding the fireside chats, Allison mentioned 3 different things. I'm only going to talk about 2 of them, actually. So the first one is students really engaging with the material in a new way. And according to a survey of the students we took after the course ended, they mentioned that their confidence in the information was greater, and it increased as a result of participating in the fireside chats, and essentially as a result of relearning and reworking the material in a new way. The other thing that Allison talked about that's really important to mention here is the way that alumni interacted with students as a result of the fireside chats and that connectivity that we tried to enhance and implement. Unfortunately, in our post-course survey of alumni, they really didn't indicate having an augmented sort of sense of connection between them and the students as a result of the fireside chats, which we attribute mostly to the fact that they were only able to watch the videos rather than be part of the production itself.
So based on our analysis, we can come to the following 5 conclusions. First, we have the shorter video lectures do help maintain participant engagement, specifically in hours ranging from 3 to 17 minutes in length. Second, the implementation of comprehension questions do help to increase and solidify learners' understanding of the course content. Third, the implementation of small discussion groups does help to increase participant engagement. However, these groups must remain large enough to sustain dialogue while still small enough to create a community. Fourth, the fireside chats were an effective pedagogical tool, but for the students. And finally, although we were not running a MOOC, we were not immune to the technical challenges that online courses face. So we did find a number of difficulties involved with formatting intriguing and challenging questions, creating and maintaining our cohorts, as well as producing fireside chats. And so we really hope that with this, though, that we are able to take, well, I digress, hold on. So one thing that's really important to mention is that a huge difficulty we faced was the fact that there are a small amount of resources and support available for this kind of project at a liberal arts institution. And so, however, what we were able to find is that while using an online platform and using this class, we were able to take some of the best aspects of online education and use them to augment the ideals and values of a liberal arts classroom.
So finally, the advent of the atomic bomb really ended up with three. It's a great course name. So in the end, the advent of the atomic bomb really had three main, I would say, good things that came out of it. First, the students taking the course really learned and interacted with a new mode, a new pedagogical tool, which is online learning. Second, we were able to bring alumni back into the learning fold and re-engage them with the university and what the university is doing today. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we were able to get two groups together, and that's of course the students and the alumni, and to have them engage and really work and look forward to that sort of issue and work on this sort of course and learn from one another. So all in all, talking back to disruptions again, everyone likes to talk about how MOOCs will one day disrupt the liberal arts and end higher education as we know it. However, from our experiences and from our experiment, we tend to disagree on this. We believe that the values of liberal arts education and the technology featured in MOOCs and online education in general can actually be brought together, and in the end, they bring out the best in one another.
Question?
Yes.
Okay, what was the alumni buy-in to this? Did they pay tuition or get some type of certification? What was their buy-in?
So alumni were not required to pay anything. They did not receive any kind of certificate. So it was solely based on them wanting to learn the content, but also this was targeted to them as a way to interact with the students and with the university.
So I'm interested in hearing from both of you how this might have impacted your own learning going forward. So what year are you?
We are both class of 2017, so in our third year at Colgate University.
All right, so now you're thinking about your next set of classes you're going to take next year. How are you approaching them differently, if at all?
Well, so the first thing, it's really interesting, is the way you sort of think about pedagogy in your own classrooms, and you eventually start critiquing your professors in the back of your mind as you're taking the course and say, well, this is what they're doing, but they could also be doing it this way. And a lot of professors use sort of this course management software called Moodle at Colgate, and you sort of see the way that they use Moodle and think back to, well, how could they tweak this to really enhance interactivity and make it more than just this boring old course management software. So you take a look at your classes from a new critical lens, though you don't normally tell your professors that.
You have a perspective too. I forgot she has for both.
Oh, that's really okay. So I think with me, it's, again, looking at that pedagogical perspective, it's helped me to understand how to make a course interactive and participatory so that instead of just going and sitting in a classroom and thinking, oh, let me pull out the reading that all I did was read this, trying to think about ways to engage myself in other contexts and in thinking about what are different modes of ways that I could interact with this and reinforce the learning.
Well, hello, thank you for your talk. My name is Crystal D. Jagger. I'm a learning designer at the University of Notre Dame. I just wanted to ask if you could tell me a little bit more about the format of the fireside chat, just to give me a bit of perspective as a designer for how that actually worked in your system.
So the format was fairly simple. We gave students creative license. They were able to choose a topic. They discussed that prior to recording with the professor as well as with one of the other students who helped design this course. She created effectively all of these fireside chats and produced them. And so the students were able to either, they could sit around and do a roundtable discussion, they could throw up diagrams and try to explain concepts to the alumni who were watching this. But effectively, it was the students who were there and who were given the task to produce something interesting that would engage not only themselves and their peers, but also alumni who don't have access to the same kinds of classroom experiences that they had.
All right, thank you very much. A MOOC MOOC as a virtual studio for creatives and experiment in designing global and testing local. This is Adrienne Garber from Columbia and Aya Sakaguchi from NovoEd.
Working? Okay, perfect. All right, hi everybody. So thank you to Columbia University Teachers College and the Columbia Center for Teaching and Learning for hosting this event. I have really enjoyed the panel so far, and we're really excited about interacting with you later. We actually want to show our contact information. So in the handout that we're providing to you, on the back you'll see our contact information as well. So think of this as the start of a conversation that we would like to continue. In addition, we want to mention our other panelists have had full-run MOOCs. We are actually in week 7 of our 10-week MOOC. So the data that we have to provide to you and that we're going to talk about is very preliminary. We did conduct a mid-course survey at the end of week 5. So for about 10 days, we've been collecting survey responses. We have peppered those anecdotal quotes throughout the presentation, but we want to be, respectful of the fact that we haven't conducted a full data analysis, and our research findings are definitely in the early stages. So we're going to start with a quote. This is a quote from Arthur Conan Doyle from The Adventure of the Cardboard Box. And the reason that we're starting with this quote is this is sort of how we approached the MOOC development process. For the School of Continuing Education, Sherlock Holmes and the Internet of Things, this was the first time that we've actually created a MOOC. And the 4 faculty members, which I'll show you in a moment, this was actually their first online teaching experience, let alone in a MOOC environment. So we also wanted to say that not only was this the first time, but we spent time looking at research of other MOOCs. So conferences like this that actually produce research and people that are publishing was very important to us. So we looked at Fiona Holland's 2014 report. We looked at deconstructing disengagement. So there were a lot of learnings that we applied, and we hope that when we have the ability to look at all of our findings, we can publish them so that others can learn from us as well. So we're going to start with 2 questions. These are questions that we asked ourselves, and we want you to be thinking about them as we conduct our presentation. The first one being, how could a MOOC environment foster a collaborative learning experience? And the second being, how could learning in a MOOC environment be rigorous and fun? The "and" is underlined, right, for purpose. So virtual studio meets project-based learning. These are the 4 instructors that Aya and I worked with. Lance Weiler from the Columbia School of Arts, Nick Fortuno from the Parsons School of Design, and then Jorgen and Ila both represent think tanks that are in Europe, Freedom Labs and Learn, Do, Share. They represented the design thinking and media anthropology aspects of the course. So let me start first with why Sherlock Holmes and why the Internet of Things. So Gartner research reported that in 2020 there will be about 25 billion connected devices in use, and Sherlock Holmes entered the public domain in 2014, so over 50 plus stories of Sherlock Holmes and his character universe are freely available for use. Lance Weiler and Nick Fortuno started a project here at Columbia, actually here on campus at the Brown Institute for Media Innovation in 2014 called Bit by Bit, an experiment in digital storytelling. That project was an on-campus, in-person workshop that they hosted with about 40 creatives. From that, they decided that wouldn't this be an interesting experiment in a virtual studio? How could we scale this so that it's not in person and it's not bounded by a physical location, but it's actually an experiment in co-authorship and collaborative storytelling that reaches beyond those boundaries in a virtual space? So can you conduct brainstorming and post-it notes and surrounded by brown paper on a long table at the Brown Institute and translate that into a virtual collaborative environment? In addition, I want to say something about this being a pilot. So We reframed MOOC for the purposes of this experiment as being a massive online-offline collaboration. So it's not your typical definition of MOOC. We're sort of wiggling our way in. The pilot only had about 300 participants. We pre-qualified those participants as well. And what I mean by pre-qualified is when we looked at a lot of the research, for example, the article about deconstructing disengagement, we wanted to know that you could participate in the full 10 weeks. We wanted to know that we were representing specific creative disciplines equally. So we weren't too heavy on programmers or too heavy on authors or too heavy on graphic designers. We wanted it to be something that everyone felt like they had an equal representation. So not pre-qualifying you in a way where you had to be a certain caliber of person or had a certain a level of experience, but really just that we knew that you could be engaged for the full 10 weeks, at least self-identified, right? And then lastly, partners of this MOOC. So in addition to who you see represented here, the Columbia School of Arts was a partner for us. Lincoln Center, the Film Society was a partner, and New York Film Festival was a partner of ours. Oops, sorry, I went backwards. So what is this MOOC about? It's grounded in a final project, a final prototype that all of the participants are working towards. So a global connected crime scene. This actually will occur at the end of week 10, in the last weekend. In about 20 cities now will be represented. So there is a physical locative component of this experience. And students are, there are about 1,000 other collaborators that are involved. So people that are outside of the MOOC, but contributing their skills and knowledge in places like Hackpad, which is owned by Dropbox, GitHub, Slack. So it really is an open experiment. It's also under the Creative Commons commercial share-alike license. So any work that's produced by the industry and professionals who are involved in this project can actually be repurposed and then also sold. Something else to mention is most of the people in the MOOC have about 9+ years industry experience. So they are artists, illustrators, graphic designers, video game developers, technically minded professionals, programmers, people that are involved in IoT as engineers, all working together towards a common purpose of having a connected global crime scene. So we're also going to show you some pictures of events. So this is an event that happened about 2 weeks, a meetup that happened about 2 weeks before the Lincoln Center Film Festival. At that event, that was like the beta test of where they were by week 6 in developing their connected object prototypes. So here you can see these are volunteers that received schematics from people within the MOOC and were producing what was given to them as a design doc or a spec doc, and then creating them for use on the plaza in Lincoln Center with about 200 live audience members. I'll take a minute and let you read that. Right, so this is about grounding their work in the physical space, the fact that they have a live audience, and they felt like that actually helped them produce better work. So there are 3 tracks in this MOOC, story, play, and design. Here's a representation, of what those comprise of. IoT actually runs throughout all of these areas. So there's cross-functionality among all of the teams in the group. And then we also use social collaboration tools. So we didn't want to prescribe a certain type of technology for people to use. So here's a representation of different types of tools that we had within the course. Plus students were actually finding their own ways of communicating. So we had them actually share best practices of things they do within their creative disciplines that they could share with other disciplines and maybe combine them to find the most optimal way of working together in distributed virtual teams. We also experimented with taxonomy. So in NovoEd, you actually can change vocabulary terms, things like changing the word assignment to a design challenge, changing the word lecture to session. We really wanted to break them out of thinking of it as a typical traditional online course. This really was supposed to be a studio space. And we actually got them to start to mimic the taxonomy, even in their survey results and survey responses. They started to say, this isn't a typical course, rather it is a collaboration, which I think Lance Weiler says about once a week. And also to be adaptive. So because there are design constraints, for example, at Lincoln Center, we had experimented with taping bodies And Lincoln Center came back and said you could absolutely not put tape on the Lincoln Center Plaza. So we quickly went into HackPad and revised the design constraints to say, this weekly podcast is going to address some challenges we've experienced with da-da-da-da-da. So another reason to have a podcast is as things are changing in your course, all the pre-recorded media and the pre-recorded lectures that we had, they didn't quite address the needs within the MOOC as the project was evolving. So also having industry experts. Does anyone know who David Rose is? Enchanted Objects? A little bit. All right, so he is a MIT Media Lab scientist, and he just wrote a book called Enchanted Objects, Desire and I'll read it. Design, Human Desire, and the Internet of Things. He was one of the guest lecturers for our podcast on the week about enchanted objects. So we were sort of mirroring the students to be able to interact with industry experts that could actually give them live feedback, creative feedback about their projects. Lance actually blogs about once every couple weeks about the course and shares that globally. So you can see his medium.com blog post, The Human Element. We provided it to you. And then also having a synchronous component, we use something called BlabIM so that they can interact. Here's Lance and Jorgen and one of the students receiving live feedback about her project. They're about an hour long and they last, I don't know, we have once or twice a week, the sort of check-in on how is your project going, what help do you need, what competencies are missing, what are the gaps we can fill in. And now I'm going to move it over to Aya so she can talk about NovoEd.
So how do we bring it all together? Adrienne mentioned a lot of different ideas that they had, and it was so fun to work with her and be creative in how we present this material to the participants who are in the collaboration. So here you see a couple examples. You see recent submissions. What did the participants, or what are the participants working on? What design challenges have they submitted? We also see that we embedded SoundCloud in here, so they have easy access to all the podcasts. We also embedded the trending Twitter hashtag, so Sherlock IoT. One of the other ways that we really created a collaborative experience in this collaboration is by using our submissions feature. So for the design challenges, participants can share with each other what they're working on, how far they've come along. You can see on the right-hand side that participants are giving each other feedback and really learning from each other. As you can see in this quote, they're inspiring each other, really stretching each other's boundaries. This person said, "I didn't think I was so open to new ideas." So it was really great to see all this knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer that was happening among these practitioners with over 9+ years of experience. We also motivated the learners to work on these design challenges by creating teams, having them self-form teams. So we saw two types of teams. We saw location-based teams. So on the right-hand side, we have a team from Brazil. We also saw interest-based teams. So if somebody was really interested in design, they created a design-based team. And the teams are a really great way to not only motivate the learners, but to also encourage them to produce their best work, to have accountability in their work, as you can see here in the quote. And how do we really bring the online, offline community together? Well, like Adrienne mentioned, one of the ways we did it was through hashtag and using Twitter. And we saw a lot of examples where the participants in the collaboration would tweet different quotes or sound bites from the course to their networks and to their friends, really sharing what they've learned from the course to people, anybody outside of the MOOC. Something else that we use is called Tagboard, which we embedded in our course. Tagboard aggregates Facebook, Vine, Instagram, Twitter. This was actually from our first design challenge. It was called #StoryGame, and it was share your own crime scene, and they all collaborated and wrote stories together about different crime scenes. And we saw that not only are these design challenges fun, they also really engage the participants in the course, and as you can see here in this quote. Throughout the course, Adrienne and I would look together at the analytics to see how the learners are reacting and participating within the course. Here on the left-hand side, you see how the learners are contributing in the design challenges, and on the right-hand side, we have design or the demographics. And we will look at this and really help iterate throughout the course, like Adrienne mentioned, using SoundCloud to give feedback to the participants about the course. Here's an example of video analytics. So As we come to a conclusion, again, we would love to talk with you and hear about your thoughts on creating this virtual studio on a MOOC and to really learn from your experience as well. And like Adrienne mentioned, our contact information is at the back of our handout, so please come talk to us and let us know if you have any questions.
Take it easy. We're only in week 7. I just keep saying that because we're still going.
No, I understand. So this just sounds phenomenal and so interesting and really, creative on your end, pedagogically creative. And how did you get everyone so interested that they were writing to you to be selected to be part of your group?
I think that part of it is the topic, Sherlock Holmes, is something that just had a natural fan base. So because of the BBC show, because of movies that have famous actors, I think it was something that was ubiquitous. People could get on board with that thematic frame. So that was one thing, is that we sort of had a natural group to pull from. The social media presence of the instructors involved also was helpful. So for example, Lance Weiler has over 10,000 followers on Twitter. So when he is promoting his own materials, as much as we could use Columbia School of Arts or Columbia School of Continuing Education, he has his own fan base that's following him. Another aspect was that all 4 of those faculty members also present at conferences. So right before the application process went live, Lance was a speaker at South by Southwest Interactive. He stumped for the project from the podium. So I think having those star faculty members that are willing to pull on their personal connections is a huge help, in addition to any sort of alumni base like Colgate was using, or Columbia School of Arts presenting it to their project partners. I think also the fact that one of the beta tests was going to be live at Lincoln Center. If you're an industry professional that doesn't work at a huge shop, but you want to be able to show your work, you're going to raise your hand to be at Lincoln Center for the New York Film Fest. So I think that was another thing. They had this huge carrot that they could offer to anybody that wanted to participate.
Quick more thing. Have you asked anyone from Sherlock or Elementary to help you guys out?
So the next beta test is Power to the Pixel, which is going to run on the along the Thames River, and BBC is actually going to be involved in that event.
I just wanted to suggest my friend Bob Goodman, who's a showrunner on Elementary, would love this.
Oh, great. That's wonderful.
And if you still have a couple of weeks left and want to tell Bob...
We do. We have 3 weeks left.
Contact me,
yes.
Grab me by the shoulder, shake me a little bit, because I might be sleeping, and I'll help you get in touch with him. He'd love this.
And also the responsiveness of the podcast. So students in the MOOC will say, I know someone that you could talk to. And on a weekly basis, we get interesting and industry experts to participate with us. So even someone that would want to come and address the MOOC would be fun. Fun.
Is there a quick question? We just have time for one quick question.
Hi, I'm Leslie Gerhardt, Product Manager of Teaching and Learning Tools at edX. This is great, and I am so interested in ways to collaborate in small groups in online courses. I guess the thing that I'm tripped up on is you're still using the word massive, and I'm wondering how, I'm not seeing a clear path for how this scales from 300 students to a massive scale. So could you talk a little bit about what you see in the future?
Sure. So a lot of that will depend on how the instructors feel at the end of the course, because you can tell this was a huge resource drain for anybody that was involved in it, because it was updating on a weekly basis, posting on a weekly basis, live session on a weekly basis, podcast on a weekly basis, and that's a lot for a free course that nobody was receiving compensation for. So I think in later panels people talk about business models. This is something you would really need to think strongly about what is the value proposition and is it sustainable from that aspect, from the resource aspect. Putting that to the side, the reason they wanted it to be small was because of the pilot. They have talked the whole time and made notes about scale. At the end of all of our weekly sessions, weekly meetings, the teaching team and the TAs, when we meet together, we talk about what happened this week and then how might scale be affected by it. I think the fact that we only have a couple TAs involved in this course, TA resource might be a way that we could scale up. Massive is something they are planning. We do have over 1,000 collaborators, but only 300 in the course. So thinking about how we addressed those 1,000 collaborators, those are ideas that we could probably fold back into the course as well. So they do a lot of peer teaching, for example, and peer review, as opposed to instructor critique.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.